Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Air Tycoon Online 2. Yes. Um, well, I forgot to make an episode yesterday, and we're in a bit of a predicament today. Um, the main reason being, if we take a look at all my slots and all the planes and the money, mostly the money, that's the problem. Yes, how can money be a problem? But yes, there's so much of it. Because I didn't play yesterday, I kind of forgot. Um, didn't really have the time or that to log in. My money has just been building up and building up and building up. And now I have to somehow manage to schedule all these planes today so that I can kind of keep up growth. Now, unlike my normal series where I gun really hard for rank 1, um, I'm not sure we're going to be doing that this series. Uh, will we achieve it anyways? Probably not. But if we do, I'm not complaining. But what I'm just saying is that there's a lot of people above me. I'm 20th right now, who are also growing a lot faster than me, specifically China Southern, the rank 1 player. Now, interestingly enough, I haven't seen any of his routes yet. I'm not really quite sure what kind of routes he's making. Um, but I guess I'll discover that in due time. Um, but yeah, basically, I'm just gonna try and expand on my own watch and do my own um, routes and such. And I don't really care what my opponents do. If they decide to um, expand really big, so be it. I'm not gonna try and catch them. I'm just gonna do my own thing. Um, and even despite that, I'm almost certain we'll have a top 10. Um, my playstyle is a bit too efficient to not achieve that as long as I keep playing. Just the question will become how high up the top 10 do we go? And the turn is passing. Um, so yeah, I'm not really sure how large I intend to get. I probably want to hover around 1,000 aircraft. 1,000 aircraft is reasonable because that means I have to request, 50 aircraft a day to keep up with my aircraft replacement once that becomes a problem. And that seems somewhat reasonable. 20 aircraft or 50 aircraft a day means I have to log on 5 times a day um, to request aircraft to make sure they get replaced by their 20-year lifespan. I really wish that the 20-year lifespan wasn't such a thing and it was more like 25 years or more, because aircraft can easily fly that long in real life, especially um, aircraft like my own aircraft, which are flying long cycles. So that means the time between each takeoff and landing is large. I really wish aircraft like that were given extra lifespan, because that would have been realistic. Um, in real life, aircraft which fly long distances between each stop definitely last much longer than, say, an A320, which has to take off and land many times a day flying short haul routes. Um, This is why we often see that long haul airlines actually fly slightly older aircraft. Um, to give you an example, you'll see Lufthansa still flying A340s. And I say still, I know it's not really been in service for so long. Um, or you'll see some airlines even still flying the 767, transatlantic, and stuff like that. But for prominent short haul carriers, you will rarely see them flying even 737 classics anymore. Um, if you go to smaller carriers, sure, I'm sure they still exist everywhere. But for example, all prominent budget carriers, um, Ryanair, EasyJet, etc., they all use newer aircraft. Um, and that's simply because the older ones are uncompetitive, but also because they don't last as long. Um, Aircraft's durability are more rated in a something called cycles, which describes how many times they take off and land, rather than the flight time, which would, I guess it would seem to make sense that flight time would be the limiting factor, but that's not really as bad as a compression cycle. If you guys have ever bent a paperclip back and forth many, many times until it breaks, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. Um, the act of, just existing and flying through the air is not so bad for an airplane, but every time it lands and takes off, it goes through a compression cycle because it has to be, um, it's at sea level pressure, and when the door gate is open and you're boarding or whatever. So it's just like neutral. There's no like stress on the hull. But as the plane climbs and climbs and climbs and climbs, and then all of a sudden, you need pressure to keep the cabin at appropriate pressure for the humans to be in. Then what ends up happening is we end up with, sorry, I'm looking for a route here, so my talking is kind of taking a backseat. Um, but yeah, what was I saying? All right, so as the plane climbs, the pressure inside the cabin becomes greater than the pressure outside the cabin, meaning the metal and the cabin and the fuselage is all being stretched and flexed every single time there's a takeoff and landing. And this puts enormous stress, um, on the fuselage. And this is what kind of gives the plane its life rating, because after enough times of compression and decompression, the plane can no longer safely do it. Cracks are forming, and then at some point, those will be too great for the plane to be able to safely take off and land. Um, and then the plane will have to be scrapped or retired. Um, or very expensive maintenance will have to take place to keep the plane flying, which sometimes does happen if it's a special plane type with good uses. uh, then that certainly might happen. The maintenance might happen to keep the plane safe to fly, but oftentimes they just end up retired, scrapped for parts, etc. um, yeah, in this game that's obviously not simulated whatsoever. um, it doesn't really matter what plane you're flying, how many cycles the plane goes through. It really doesn't matter. The plane will always just go bad in 20 years. Even if you never use it, it will be needing to be replaced in 20 years, which I think is dumb. I think the lifespan of the plane should be based off of takeoffs and landings. Um, and for example, wide body long haul jets could be given slightly lower. Um, slightly lower tolerance, I guess, for takeoff and landings, and then the like narrow body short haul um, aircraft in this game could be given more tolerance for many cycles, and that would be a more interesting way to balance the game where it doesn't require your planes to be replaced so many times. Um, yeah, it's kind of frustrating to have to keep replacing planes, even if I think they're good. Especially in the 2030s, that's the worst replacement because you're just replacing the planes with the same thing. All the replacements for planes before that are kind of plane upgrades. Like when I replace my Lucian 62Ms with bigger, nicer, modern planes, I'll be saving fuel. I'll be carrying more passengers. It'll be great. Um, but currently, like by the 2030s, I'll just be replacing my A330s with A330s, maybe A350s, you know what I mean? But like it's marginal improvements at that point. Or I'll be replacing my sometimes I'll be have to replacing my freaking like what is it? Like 747s with more 747s, or A380s with new A380s, because that's the only plane that's that big. Um, and yeah, it's an unfortunate part of the game, but I guess we have to deal with it. So yeah. Anyways, as you guys can see, we are starting to do the normal thing and start struggling with slots. This always happens. So I'm gonna be right back once I get the chance to do a whole bunch of slot requests. Um, yeah, I just gotta make sure that I have like. Actually, I can probably keep finding some more routes to make before I completely run out of slot requests. But yeah, this is one of the more frustrating parts of this game. Is just running out of slots. Um, way too often. Uh, I personally wish that the slot system worked in a slightly different way, where we use slightly less slots, or you just got more, That's the main thing. I wish we had more. Um, because even though I'm scheduling strictly long haul and like not even like medium long haul, I'm like long haul. All like 9,000 kilometer average like route length. Um, so the most slot efficient way to schedule, it still doesn't seem to be able to keep up. Like I cannot just play the game without needing to pause or making suboptimal routes because I'm starting to run into slot restrictions, and that is pretty frustrating. Um, yes, schedules by slot, schedules by plane. Let's go ahead and open this up too. And yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of routes left, obviously, but they're just like I've been slot requesting on and off, like probably a few times a day for the past 2 days, basically, just for this time. And I'm already starting to run low. Um, it doesn't really look like it because like I'm not the kind of guy to be able to say like dedicate myself to a task which is intermittent very well, if you know what I mean. And slot request is kind of that. You have to come on every half an hour. I'm much better at doing the kind of stuff which requires you to just sit down and work for a block of time and then stop after a considerable amount has been done. For example, studying for final exams, I've never really struggled with, um, because you sit down, you study, you study, and then you'll always have more to study. Feels like, at least when you're studying for finals, and then when you're finally done, then you can go and take your final or whatever. But in terms of assignments and homework and that kind of stuff, I've always struggled because, well, for me at least, it feels like just like such a small thing. It's hard to get motivated enough to start, so I often, miss some of that stuff. Uh, yeah, not the best at that. So I wish most classes were just more weighted to the final exam. I'm one of those people where I would prefer if the final exam was worth like a 95%. Um, yeah, I've only once ever been in the situation where I was confident for an exam, for a final exam, and then was surprised by a low grade or not being able to do some of the questions. And that was a pretty interesting story. The class average for that final was probably the lowest I've ever seen, 37%. Um, because the class average was 37%, and I got 36%. And sad to say, I was below average, but um, despite that, the class was scaled like a B. So yeah, um, yeah, like the professor was not about to fail his entire class. You know what I mean? The exam was obviously too difficult, so I guess we got a fair result in the end, which is not bad. Um, Props to that prof. I was talking to a student from that class earlier, actually, um, and they told me from the previous year. I mean, that's what I meant to say, and they told me that it was one of the easiest classes they ever had, and it was a free A. And my guess for what happened is our prof overcompensated a little bit for the next year. Um, yeah, I find that oftentimes professors struggle to relate to how intelligent we are, which is not very. um, I mean, most people like in the position of like a professor or whatever probably doesn't struggle with the same things that me or you or me would. Um, I don't want to say that they're just so far above that, but I mean they probably are. So yeah. Anyways, that's enough talk about school. Anyways, let's get back to Airway Sim here. As you guys can see, I'm starting to run out of aircraft, so I'm gonna eventually have to cut the video and find some more cities to make slots in, and some more aircraft. So I'll be right back later when I have a lot more aircraft and slots. And once again, silly me is forgetting to show my report. Uh, Ooh, yeah, it's not great. This is a down tick, but it's been fluctuating between about 250 and 150. Um, So yeah, the growth is not good. I should be around 500, 600K at this point. But due to me only playing once a day or for a couple hours a day instead of a little bit throughout the whole day, which I usually do, I'm not quite getting that exponential growth as I normally do, and I'm really struggling to keep up with slot requests. That's my main issue here. Um, yeah. However many slots I'm getting is just not working. Uh, yeah, I'm kind of wishing I had Air Tycoon Online 3 where you can lease 747s so that forever keeps your value down. Um, and that kind of has the effect that since your value is always low, you are always able to request slots at level 4 until you really, really become extremely profitable. Eventually, there'll be, an overnight where all of a sudden you can't request slots like that anymore. But you will have so many slots at that point, like probably about as many as I have now, where a lot of these slots were had to be requested in freaking 20-minute time. But yeah, anyways, I'm rambling on now. I'll be back in a bit. Alright, welcome back, peeps, and I guess it's time for some more Airway Sim for me. I keep saying Airway Sim, Air Tycoon. Um, yeah, as you can see, our profit goes up significantly on the upticks. Um, Fortunately, a lot of the upticks are during nighttime for me, which sucks because it's always fun to see when your profits are high. It's really like encouraging is not the best word, but like it kind of makes you feel like, oh, my company's doing so great. Let's keep it expanding. That's kind of the feeling you get when your company is doing really well, and that's what you see during the upticks. So I kind of wish that every tick was an uptick. Um, Unfortunately, obviously, that can't be all the case. And it's really nice when the upticks are in the afternoon because that tends to be when I play most often. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not the case. They're in the AM hours of the morning, which, if I was in the summer, would be a good thing for me. Because every time I don't have something, like pinning my sleep schedule back, like school or a life, my sleep schedule will just roll back as far as it can go, basically, until it's basically just perfectly offset with a normal day. um, yeah, it's to the point where sometimes I'm awake when there's more like darkness outside, even in the summer. Then there's lightness. Like, yeah, it's not great. Um, but yeah, that tends to be what happens when I have nothing to do, I guess. So yeah, I guess it's good that right now I do have stuff to do because otherwise that would probably be happening to me. Um, Anyways, on another note, as you guys can see, we are just expanding extremely quickly, using up as many slots as possible in our video airport London Stansted. Um, Looking at it, we're gonna need a lot of new cities to expand to if we want to keep this stopover action up. So I'm just gonna go ahead and find a few of those. Let's see. We're gonna need some airports in this direction from London, and I guess we could use Colombo. Um, But yeah, this is basically what we're doing now. We make stopovers, and boy, do I love stopovers because I can be 100% sure that all of these planes are going to be 100% full, even though our World Traveler Index this world is extremely disappointing to say the least. Um, yeah, the World Traveler Index this world was 2,800 right now, I believe. In 1970 is pretty poor. Um, but I guess at this point I should expect World Traveler Indexes of the worlds I enter to be bad because that just seems to be how it works. Um, I believe the last Air Tycoon Online playthrough I did was in Air Tycoon Online 3, and that world had the, I believe, second highest World Traveler Index I've ever had in a world, and it was literally just 4,000 by the end of the game, and that was the highest I'd ever seen in my life. The second highest, the first highest I've ever seen for World Traveler Index. And by the way, when the game is like this, it is so ridiculously fun. The World Traveler Index was 5,300 in Air Tycoon Online 1. I do believe that in ATO 1, the World Traveler Indexes are just higher. if I'm not like mistaken, I believe like the way the world worked and stuff like that, it just was higher. Um, but yeah, even aside from that, with a world traveler index that high, it basically made every route you make, even without a stopover, like with and that's how that game worked, of course, without stopovers as an option, so extremely profitable. It was almost insane. um, yeah, if I remember correctly, you could easily find routes which would fill uh A3, like I don't want to say A380, but probably 747 size planes directly everywhere. Like routes such as Paris to any city, like would just be full because the cities are so big. Um, if you guys remember Fukuoka in Japan, how big it is, it's about 150, 200, something like that. In terms of business and tour, so about 350 combined. These cities were 300, 300. They were as big as like Houston or Dallas in this world. And then can you imagine how big Houston and Dallas were? Like Houston and Dallas were so enormous that you could, connect like anything to it and it would be just a massive, massive route. And that's how the game was in when the World Traveler Index is that high. And I'm really sad that we rarely ever see that anymore. Instead, we get I keep getting these worlds where you just have to abuse stopovers with the smallest planes to make money. Um, and that's fine and all because, it's a strategy, it works. Um, I'm still able to make, billions and billions in the game, even with a restriction like that. But it's just so much less fun than if you can actually utilize the large aircraft to make money and not need so many thousands of small ones. Because if you want to make a 1,000K or a million K or 1 billion in game dollars, yes, you could use 1,000 small aircraft or you could use 500 large ones. Um, like obviously on exact math there, but you can keep scaling like that up, and you need all of a sudden you need 1,500 more aircraft, you need thousands more aircraft, and no, 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 thank you. Just please give us bigger worlds. So yeah, that's a bit of a mini rant over. Luckily, Air Tycoon 2 has a really nice, forgiving business model, which doesn't really need as much business in Tora with our many stopovers. I mean, we can upgrade these IL-62M sized aircraft to aircraft the size of, let's say, sorry, I'm thinking right now, A310. Yes, that's the aircraft I was looking for. And that would be, a nice marginal upgrade to the size of these aircraft. And that's kind of, um, if the World Traveler Index, at least in this world, continues on the trend it is, which it really doesn't seem to be trending up, which is unfortunate. That'll be what we have to do. Obviously, these games go to 2030, but I rarely play actively past like 2000 because it feels so pointless to make a route only for it to fly for a few years and then for the game to be over. And especially later in the game, the ROI times, which I've talked so much about, get longer. They get longer and longer and longer as the game goes on because the planes get more and more expensive relative to how much they make thanks to high fuel costs and such. And yeah, it's just more worth it to keep the routes you do have and keep replacing those, and then yeah. But anyways, this is a lot of tedious all the same route making, so I'm gonna call it for this episode. I'm gonna keep trying to use all these aircraft off camera. There's so many. I don't expect me to be able to manage to use all of them. There's just, oh god, so many. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.